Page number 123 continued. Samuel Butler, 1612 to 1680. In marked contrast with Dryden, who devoted his life to literature and won his success by hard work, is Samuel Butler, who jumped into fame by a single careless work which represents not any serious intent or effort, but the pastime of an idle hour. We are to remember that, though the Royalists had triumphed in the Restoration, the Puritan spirit was not dead, nor even sleeping, and that the Puritan held steadfastly to his own principles. Against these principles of justice, truth, and liberty, there was no argument, since they expressed the manhood of England. But many of the Puritan practices were open to ridicule, and the Royalists, in revenge for their defeat, began to use ridicule without mercy. During the early years of the Restoration, doggerel verses, D-O-G-G-E-R-L, doggerel verses ridiculing Puritanism, and burlesque, that is, a ridiculous representation of a serious subject or a serious representation of ridiculous subjects, were the most popular form of literature with London society. Of all this burlesque and doggerel, the most famous is Butler's Hudibras, Hudibras, a work to which we can trace many of the prejudices that still prevail against Puritanism. Of Butler himself we know little. He is one of the most obscure figures in our literature. During the days of Cromwell's protectorate, he was in the employ of Sir Samuel Luke, a crabbed and extreme type of Puritan nobleman, and here he collected his material and probably wrote the first part of his burlesque, which of course he did not dare to publish until after the Restoration. Hudibras is plainly modelled upon the Don Quixote of Cervantes. It describes the adventures of a fanatical justice of the peace, Sir Hudibras, and of his squire, Ralpho, in their endeavour to put down all innocent pleasures. In Hudibras and Ralpho, the two extreme types, the Puritan party, Presbyterians and Independents, were mercilessly ridiculed. When the poem first appeared in public in 1663, after circulating secretly for years in manuscript, it became at once enormously popular. The king carried a copy in his pocket, and courtiers vied with each other in quoting its most scurrilous passages. A second and third part, continuing the adventures of Hudibras, was published in 1664 and 1668. At best, the work is a wretched doggerel, but it was clever enough and strikingly original, and since it expressed the royalist spirit towards the Puritans, it speedily found its place in literature, which reflects every phase of human life. Hobbes and Locke, Hobbes, Hobbes and Locke, Locke. Thomas Hobbes, 1588 to 1679, is one of the writers that puzzle the historian with a doubt as to whether or not he should be included in the story of literature. The one book for which he is famous is called Leviathan, or the Matter, Form and Power of a Commonwealth, 1651. It is partly political, partly a philosophical book, combining two central ideas which challenge and startle the attention, namely that self-interest is the only guiding power of humanity, and that blind submission to rulers is the only true basis of government. In a word, Hobbes reduced human nature to its purely animal aspects and then asserted confidently that there was nothing more to study. Certainly, therefore, end of page 123. Now, page 124. Certainly, therefore, as a reflection of the underlying spirit of Charles and his followers, it has no equal in any purely literary work of the time. John Locke, 1632 to 1704, is famous as the author of a single great philosophical book, the Essay Concerning Human Understanding, 1690. This is a study of the nature of the human mind and the origin of ideas, which, far more than the work of Bacon and Hobbes, is the basis upon which English philosophy has since been built. Aside from their subjects, both works are models of the new prose, direct, simple, convincing, for which Dryden and the Royal Society laboured. They are known to every student of philosophy, but are seldom included in a work of literature. Evelyn and Pepys, Evelyn, Evelyn and Pepys, Pepys. These two men, John Evelyn, 1620 to 1706, and Samuel Pepys, 1633 to 1703, are famous as the writers of diaries, in which they jotted down the daily occurrences of their own lives, without any thought that the world would ever see or be interested in what they had written. Evelyn was the author of Silva, the first book on trees and forestry in English, and Terra, which is the first attempt at a scientific study of agriculture. But the world has lost sight of these two good books, while it cherishes his diary, which extends over the greater part of his life and gives us vivid pictures of society in his time, and especially of the frightful corruption of the royal court. Pepys began life in a small way as a clerk in a government office, but soon rose by his diligence and industry to be Secretary of the Admiralty. Here he was brought into contact with every grade of society, from the king's ministers to the poor sailors of the fleet. Being inquisitive as a blue jay, he investigated the rumors and gossip of the court, as well as the small affairs of his neighbors, and wrote them all down in his diary with evident interest. But because he chattered most freely and told his little book as a great many secrets which it were not well for the world to know, he concealed everything in shorthand. And here again he was like the blue jay, which carries off and hides every bright trinket it discovers. The diary covers the years from 1660 to 1669 and gossips about everything, from his own position and duties at the office, his dress and kitchen and cook and relatives. The diary covers the years from 1660 to 1669 and gossips about everything, from his own position and duties at the office, his dress and kitchen and cook and relatives, to the great political intrigues of office and the scandals of high society. No other such minute picture of the daily life of an age has been written. Yet, for a century and a half, it remained entirely unknown, and not until 1825 was Pepys' shorthand deciphered and published. Since then, it has been widely read and is still one of the most interesting examples of diary writing that we possess. Eminent writers of comedy of manners. Thomas Shadwell. Thomas Shadwell succeeded Dryden in the laureateship and was well known as a witty talker and an amusing writer. As a dramatist, he is distinguished by his wit. His plays Squire of Alsatia (1669), Epsom Wells (1676) and Bury Fair (1686) are vividly realistic pictures of well-known 17th century society. William Wycherley Wycherley 1640 to 1716. His first play, Love in a Wood, impressed the Duchess of Cleveland. His next play, The Gentleman Dancing Master, is an average play like the previous one. His finest plays, inspired by Molière's La Misanthrope, was The Country Wife and The Plain Dealer. Both these plays are extremely witty. The Plain Dealer has the satirical power of Ben Jonson. He is superior to Shadwell and Etheridge in the bright and vivacious quality of his dialogue. William Congreve Congreve 1670 to 1729. Congreve, who wrote The Old Bachelor 1693, The Double Dealer, Love for Love, and The Ways of the World, is the best and finest writer of the comedy of manners. The Way of the World is considered by common consent as a work of art and as a pure comedy of manners by dint of its many artistic excellences, such as wit and brilliant sparkling dialogues. Construction and characterizations are also equally brilliant. Rickett remarks, but such scenes as those where reputations are murdered by gossip, such characters as Mrs. Millamant and Mirabell, such flashes of wit in the talk between Mrs. Marwood and Millamant are to the fore, reveal the Restoration drama at its height. In Congreve's works, the comedy of manners reaches perfection. Albert remarks that their undoubted immorality is saved from being objectionable by brilliant wit, a hard finish, and a total lack of realism. In the artificial society which he depicts, moral judgment would be out of place. The tone is one of cynical vivacity. The characters are all well drawn. Congreve's prose is lucid and pointed, and shows an excellent ear for rhythm and cadence. In all things, he is a polished artist whose distinctive quality is brilliance. End of page 124. Now page 125. George Etheridge 1635 to 1691. Etheridge, in his three plays, The Conical Revenge, The Would If She Could, She Would If She Could, The Man of the Mode, or Sir Faughling Flutter, painted a true picture of the graceful but licentious upper classes. The prose dialogue is natural and brilliant, and its light, airy grace conceals some deficiency of plot and construction. He paints a true picture of the graceful, heartless, and licentious upper classes of the period. Sir John Vanbrugh, Vanbrugh. Vanbrugh had a versatile career, being in turn soldier, herald, and architect. His best comedies are The Relapse, The Provoked Wife, and Confederacy. In his first two plays, all the familiar puppets of the Restoration comedy The fops and the fools were treated with more naturalness, if less wit, than Congreve, and with far less coarseness. The Confederacy is the finest play of this period in characterization, construction, and dialogue. His plays are remarkable for genial humour. George Farquhar, Farquhar, 1678 to 1707, a man of versatile genius. Farquhar was in turn a clergyman, an actor, and a soldier, and died when he was 29 years old. His plays are Love and a Bottle, The Constant Couple, Sir Henry Wildair, The Inconstant, The Way to Win Him, The Recruiting Officer, and De Beau Stratagem. In the last two plays, Farquhar, in the words of Edward Albert, added something new to Restoration comedy, in taking his material from a wider life than the polite upper class depicted by Congreve, and his characters are more like ordinary people. His dialogue lacks the polish and the sustained wit of Congreve, and is nearer the level of normal conversation. In his rapidly developing humanity and his growing respect for moral standards, Farquhar looks forward to the drama of Steele and the succeeding age. The Restoration age was an important juncture in the development of English prose. Broadly speaking, it was the period when English prose moved from antiquity to modernity. Matthew Arnold observes in this connection, the Restoration marks the real moment of birth of our modern prose. English prose after the Restoration breaks with the times preceding it, finds the true law of prose, and becomes modern, becomes, in spite of superficial differences, the style of our society. Louis I Bradford avers that Dryden and his contemporaries created modern Louis I Bradford avers that Dryden and his contemporaries created modern English prose. The prose before the Restoration is characterized by proximity, involvedness, complexity, and diffuseness, but the prose after the Restoration has the modern qualities of clarity, precision, and simplicity. With the Restoration, English prose moves speedily towards being strictly functional. It retrenches all unnecessary ornamentation and starts the job of doing without fuss the task which it is ordained to perform. The transition. The linguistic change in the Restoration age went hand in hand with the social change. With the stability in society came the stability in language. This period saw the transition from the turbulence of antiquity to the stability and balance of the new times. This transition was the sum total of many complex forces. So was the transition in English prose from the fluidity, complexity, and the quaintness of writers like Burton and Brown to the clarity, conciseness, perspicuity, and modernity of writers like Dryden, Bunyan, Halifax, and others. Dryden was the writer to set the tone with his racy, masculine, and forceful prose, and the change was completed by the prose writers of the age of Queen Anne like Addison and Swift. Critical interest. What is also of interest to note is that in the Restoration age, critical interest in prose was shown for the first time in the history of English literature. Critical interest in poetry dates from a much earlier period, but such interest in prose is visible only in this period. Before this period, the rules of English grammar and syntax were in a state of fluidity. In the Restoration period, the need of stabilizing the English language in general and prose in particular was voiced by many eminent writers like Dryden and Thomas Pratt. They expressed the desire to clarify and fix the language once and for all, so as to obviate the possibility of undue license on account of the fluidity of the rules of grammar and syntax. To this end, some prominent writers even went so far as to propose the establishment of an Academy of Language on the lines of French Academy. For example, Dryden wrote in the dedication to the rival ladies, end of page 125, now page 126. Dryden wrote in the dedication to the rival ladies, 1664, I am sorry that, speaking so noble a language as we do, we have not a more certain measure of it as they have in France, where they have an academy erected for the purpose. However, this proposed academy was destined to have no existence apart from the one on paper, even though in 1664 a committee was nominated by the Royal Society to take steps for the stabilization of the English language. But what is noteworthy here is the interest taken in it during the period in question, as also the desire expressed by quite a few writers for fixing the English language which occasioned it.